Africa has been besieged by a flood, and the people in South Africa are talking about an outbreak of cholera which killed 29 people. An orphanage in Sudan's capital has been evacuated following the death of more than 70 infants, toddlers and older children from hunger and illnesses. African leaders are now ready for mediation in the conflict and ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, and they are sending a delegate of 6 in mid-June. Good afternoon, our dear viewers. Welcome to today's edition of the 1 p.m. news. Coming to you live and direct from Golfe TV Africa here in the city of Cotonou with Hazele OGOIGBE. Now to the news in detail, starting from the Nigerian scene. Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has asked for patience as he defends his decision to stop subsidizing fuel. Now, the government says the subsidy, which has been in place since 1977, will officially be withdrawn from the end of June 2023. Now, it comes at a time when Nigerians are already struggling to cope with the record high unemployment in Nigeria and also an increasing daily poverty rate. Now, inflation in Nigeria is at an 18-year high. The cost of fuel and transportation has already risen sharply since President Tinubu made the announcement in his inaugural speech, and people are paying up to 3 times as much for petrol. More information in the following report.
Closed petrol stations. Queues of people desperate to fill up at stations that are still open, and skyrocketing prices. Nigerians have been accustomed to cheap fuel for decades. But now with the cut of subsidies, people here in Lagos say they can't afford the increase in costs.
And currently, the fuel subsidy have really been hard on us. Formerly at NMPC, they will give you for a litre 184 naira. But as at yesterday, I bought 1 litre for 435 naira.
Presently, when we look at transportation, going to work is higher, and maybe your earning at work is not even much. The food, everything is expensive. So, man, it's really affecting us. The government should just have mercy on Nigeria.
In all of this, salary has not increased. Salary, imagine someone, a friend of mine pays 700 from Shangote to Lekki. He now pays 1,002, 1,005, and he's earning 80,000. So let's do the maths. There's nothing left.
Nigeria runs on fuel. It's not just cars, buses and trucks. People rely on generators to power their homes and businesses. And the price hike is having a knock-on effect. Food prices have risen too. Many Nigerians were already struggling without these extra burdens. Nigeria is oil rich and one of the top 2 crude oil exporters on the continent. But it cannot refine enough. So it has imported its petrol and sold it to the public at a subsidized price. There is hope a new refinery might help. But in the meantime, should Nigerians start paying the real price of petrol as Tinubu wants?
My opinion is that the government should keep paying for it. Let's enjoy the country. Let the poor rest. Let them breathe. The after effect of it, of course, for a long time, might be beneficial for everybody. But everybody is suffering. Imagine the overall effect of this subsidy removal. Transportation is going to go up. Food prices, every other thing has gone up.
I think we'll bear it for some time, after which, if the refineries are being constructed and if they are being constructed, I think the price of fuel will reduce for some time. It will reduce. and I think Nigerians should just bear it for some time.
It's not the first time this unpopular move has been discussed. Previous administrations have failed or backed away from seeing it through. So, cutting the fuel subsidy will be a major test for Tinubu's administration.
It's quite a very serious situation happening right now in Nigeria, and the impact is dovetailing into other African countries that rely on Nigeria for petrol. Now crossing over to the Brazilian scene, Brazilian indigenous people held demonstrations in protest of a measure approved by the lower house of Congress that opponents say would limit their land rights and environmental protection. Information in the following report.
Brazilian indigenous people took to the streets to voice their opposition to proposed legislation they say would limit recognition of ancestral lands. The bill, approved by the lower house of Congress, would also weaken oversight of environmental protections. Its passage by the lower chamber marked a defeat for the government of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, which opposed the measure, but did not have enough votes to stop it.
I'm against this appropriation that they are doing with our original right to this land and against indigenous people.
As Congress debates the bill, the Brazilian Supreme Court is considering whether the proposed changes are constitutional. Protests in Sao Paulo and other cities this week have been peaceful so far, unlike recent rallies when demonstrators clashed with police on a highway.
We are protecting nature. We are nature.
The measure next goes to the Senate for consideration. If approved, it faces a presidential veto, which lawmakers can override. For Jan Bochat in Sao Paulo.
On the Ghanaian scene, a painter in Ghana is using her art to campaign against child marriage. Now, Awele Ayiboro was forced into marriage as a teenager and is using her own experience to dispel misconceptions about the development of girls and young women. More information in the following report.
26-year-old Hawa Ali Ayibura Awanle recounts when her parents gave her away to a man she describes as elderly to be his wife. She was only 13 years old then. Awanle was forced to stop school.
My mom introduced me to a man, twice older than me, as my husband or future husband. And that was very depressing at that very age, because that's when you are very naive.
She escaped from the man's home with the help of some sympathetic family members. Today, Awanle is taking on child and forced marriages through art. She's telling the stories of victims like her through paintings and exhibiting them in public spaces.
One that focused on the past and the other that focused on the future. So the painting behind me focus on the future of these victims. So I paint my women in suits. So suit represents freedom.
A March 2023 survey by Africa Education Watch shows that nearly 1/4 of girls between the age of 12 and 18 in Ghana have been married off or are in some kind of consensual union. Women's rights advocates say this is because of cultural norms that see young women as subordinate to men. The high cost of living, they say, is also forcing girls into marriage.
Then there's the issue of economic insecurity. So where families do not have the financial resources, because girls are relegated, they usually would give up a girl, place her at risk of marriage to ease off the financial burden of the family.
Ghanaian state authorities say the government has established a national goal of eliminating child marriage by 2027, in part by encouraging girls to remain in school even if they become pregnant. In the meantime, artists like Awanle hope that their work will convince Ghanaian families to postpone marriage for their daughters until the girls are grown up.
Such an inspiring story talking about forced child marriage that is very common on the African continent. Now, still on the African continent, crossing over to South Sudan. Now, South Sudan has warned that it will crack down on illegal foreign exchange trading in its attempt to control inflation in the country. Now, the local currency, the South Sudanese pound, is continuously losing value against the European pound. More information in the following report.
Residents in South Sudan's capital say they continue to face difficulties in buying everyday items due to continuous rise in prices. This time, the loss of value of the South Sudanese pound against the US dollar has led to a rise in the price of water, which is usually distributed using trucks in Juba.
We are so tired, and the worst thing is, sometimes if we complain with the citizen, the government is saying the economy is not okay and the issue of the dollar rate. Sometimes if the dollar reduces, the prices which are supposed to be reduced will remain as it is.
South Sudan's government says it has a plan to tackle inflation.
The government of South Sudan is in the process of planning. The economic cluster is planning. The economic ministries and others are actually planning, and we hope that within the shortest possible period, all these plans will come into being. We cannot declare them now, otherwise those who are fighting us in the black market will begin to plan and encounter them before we could do anything. So we are working, we'll not declare them, but people will see them.
The country's central bank has accused a section of commercial banks and non-governmental organizations of not respecting policies set up by the government. Authorities here also blame some foreign exchange businesses for not following the country's financial rules and regulations. They argue that is adding to the spiraling rate of inflation.
However, the country has also been hit by an influx of people fleeing conflict in neighboring Sudan and a cut in supply of commodities that previously came from Khartoum.
The African Development Bank is contributing $7 million to assist Sudanese refugees in South Sudan. Some of the money is meant to help the host communities cope with the rising population in their areas.
We look forward to seeing that this grant will be immediately implemented and that we see an impact in the lives of our communities.
President Salva Kiir has made several changes in the country's finance ministry and central bank, but the changes have not yet addressed inflation.
Away from that, crossing over to Sudan. Now, Sudan's gold industry has totally collapsed after 2 months of spiraling instability in the North African nation. Authorities say exports have ground to a halt. Processing equipment have been damaged and the headquarters of several gold companies have been looted in the capital, Khartoum.
It's another challenge Sudan is facing because of the ongoing conflict. The country's key revenue earner has been hit hard.
The market was affected by the burning and looting of the gold complex in Khartoum, just as the states were affected by the price of gold due to the pressure on the demand and lack of supply.
Sudan exported 34.5 tons of gold last year, a record number in the last decade. Now the country's main refinery is trapped in the fighting zone in Khartoum.
The main challenges for gold industry in Sudan remain the closure of trade routes, the looting of the main market in Khartoum, and the scarcity of fuel and production materials.
The gold sector in Sudan saw unprecedented growth in 2022, providing the state with revenues exceeding $2 billion, a number that could even go higher if the industry was protected from smuggling.
Everything comes to Khartoum and is distributed from there. We haven't received new gold since April. The market is paralyzed.
Sudan's economy is heavily reliant on the gold industry and its export. The collapse of this vital sector means the country could plunge further into economic despair.
Away from that, on the local scene, the abundance of mangoes in Benin's markets proves that we are in the middle of mango season. Now, this report talks about the challenges mango sellers are going through considering the preservation of this very nice fruit. The abundance of mangoes on Benin's market proves that they are in the middle of mango season. The season generally runs from April to August to September each year. In addition to the markets, mangoes are sold along the main roads in small shops in the neighborhoods and even on the trays of street vendors. Benin Republic grows many different varieties of mango and the vendors are obviously very knowledgeable about the various species and they recommend them to their customers. The list of mangoes produced in Benin is inexhaustible, and it should be noted that each of these mangoes has its own characteristics in terms of taste, texture, and ripening period. The price of mango ranges between 100 francs CFA to 500 francs, and from 200 to 1,000 francs for a set of 5 mangoes. The mangoes are sold according to their quality and variety, and the affordability of these products is recognized by the consumers. However, apart from the availability of mangoes in the market, there are many difficulties that only wholesalers and retailers traverse. The transportation of goods after purchase and the consequence of urbanization are some of the major challenges encountered by retailers and wholesalers. Added to this is the lack of sales in the market. Those involved in the market sector are complaining about the losses they make daily as a result of the low sales turnout. To remedy this lack of mango conservation, which explains this considerable waste of resources, RAIN is urging the relevant authorities to look into the matter in order to find solutions that will ultimately benefit the whole nation. The search for effective means of conservation, provision for processing, exploitation and organization of the sector could considerably reduce the losses recorded and reassure marketing. Like cotton, soya and pineapple, the mango sector could be an economic source of development to Benin Republic. Away from that, on the global scene, UNHCR and the Norwegian Refugee Agency say conflict and flooding have forced many in Somalia to leave their homes. Now, aid agencies say over 1 million people are now displaced in Somalia, and this happened since January.
Like many other people in this camp for the internally displaced in Beledweyne, Amina Abdullah was displaced 3 times in just the past 2 years. First by tribal skirmishes, then by severe drought, and finally by flash floods that followed recent heavy rains. She faces many challenges as she tries to rebuild her life at this IDP camp.
We have no proper shelter here, no clean water, no health centers, and even hospitals nearby for pregnant mothers to deliver in, just makeshift dispensaries. So there are several challenges, but we pray to the Almighty.
This medical team from Beledweyne's main hospital comes here every day to provide much-needed healthcare services to the displaced families, but they are not enough, given the many challenges they face, including latest one, an outbreak of diarrhea in the IDP camp.
We provide assistance in dealing with diseases like diarrhea, infections, and skin diseases. Most of the residents here are suffering from skin disease complications, and we provide them with free drugs with volunteer medical officers on standby.
Local authorities already face multiple crises, which have displaced thousands from big towns like Beledweyne. However, they are trying their level best to assist people like Amina get basic services, such as clean water supplies and proper shelter.
It's a difficult situation. People displaced by conflict in the Hiran region to the city were again displaced by flooding. But we are doing all we can in our capacity as the local council.
According to UNHCR, more than 1 million Somalis have been displaced in the country during the past 4 months alone.
Those forced to flee are arriving in big overcrowded cities like Mogadishu, which are already hosting millions displaced by drought and conflict.
And our dear viewers, this is where I conclude today's news edition, coming to you live and direct from Golfe TV Africa with Hazele OGOIGBE. Join me by 7 p.m. for Focal Point. Enjoy the rest of your day.